I must say that I love being an oblate. I hate being an oblate on days like this. I love preaching. I hate preaching in such great moments like this. Actually, I hate the word hate. And yet we use it all the time, don't we? We use that word all the time. There are certain things that make me hate the word hate. For example, you ever notice how people ask you what time is it? They always say, "Excuse me, do you know the time?" As if I don't know where my watch goes. Think about that. You may not know this, but when we're poor little oblate students, we'd be standing at the bus stop, and people would ask, did the bus pass by yet? I hate it. No, there's a lot of things that I hate. And I think that in a way, even little funny and things like that actually does make us learn how to hate. Now, allows us to learn little by little that it's okay to hate. We may not call it hate from the very beginning. We may not say hate all the time. We've come up with different words to describe the same feeling. Things like, I dislike. Things like, I'm indifferent to it. Things like, as long as it doesn't bother me, doesn't bother you. I unlike, I dislike. No, I don't care for. All of these words, in any which way that we use them, they're describing a feeling. They're describing an inner feeling of rejection. They're describing an inner feeling of not acknowledging, of alienating, as a matter of fact, of alienating, of keeping people away. And it comes from the inside. It begins by just a simple little thing as I hate. I hate the word I hate. Hate is probably one of the most subtle ways that we experience and that we dish out abuse and violence. Hate. Hate is a form of abuse and of violence that sometimes we're able to justify and rationalize. Hatred is not the same either. Hate is not the same. Hate can come in so many ways. Just as many people as we are in here this evening, those are about how many ways that we can hate. God has made every single one of us totally unique, totally different, one from another, that he actually made us totally able to hate differently all one another. Isn't that cool? You can't hate like me, and I can't hate like you. Sounds funny, but it's the truth. Each one of us can do it in such a different way. We don't even have to say it. A lot of times we can show hate, violence, and abuse even just by body language. Simple body language. Simply not acknowledging someone is causing them violence. Maybe not physical violence, but it sure is violence to the creation of God. Because God created every single one of us, no matter what age, no matter what color, no matter what creed, no matter what gender, no matter what anything. God created all of us the same, and his life-giving spirit is in all of us. And if that's true about us as human beings, how much more true is that about all creation? And every single time that we disrespect or that we don't acknowledge the living presence of God in someone, that's violating. That's causing abuse to God's creation. I never thought about it this way. But have you ever been, or I'm not going to ask, have you ever done it? It's not confession night. But have you ever seen someone driving down the street, well, you can't drive anywhere else, right? It's one of those things. Driving on the street, and cigarette butts get thrown out? But then later on you see water bottles get thrown out, bags of food being thrown out. That's violence. That's abuse to God's creation. When we see the filth that goes into our water, into our plants, into our natural resources, that's abuse. When we do that to one another, when we don't recognize the presence of the living God in each other, it's abuse and it is violence. And we don't even have to do it physically. It could be totally non-physical, it could be verbal. Just think about the look that we give to each other sometimes when we meet someone that's a bit different than us. Just think about the look that we get when we walk into a room of people who are different than us. Think about the look that, for example, you who are wives give to your husbands when he comes back from a business meeting smelling like Anheuser-Busch. Think about, parents, the look you give to your children when they come home past the curfew. That's even torture. I remember when I was little, I can't say when I was little because I still am. When I was younger, my mom used to torture us even more. And I don't mean physically. But she would say things like, "Wait till your dad gets home." You remember that? Wait till your dad gets home. I'm going to let him. Because, see, my mother was the caring one. My father was the disciplinarian one. Now, he'll take care of it, right? So my mom would tell me something like, wait till your dad gets home. Now, my father used to get home sometimes around 5:30. My mom would say this to me at 9 in the morning. You can imagine going through your day waiting to know what was coming when my dad got home. I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't do my math work. People like, Chava, what's wrong? I'm thinking about my dad. I couldn't play baseball. It's like, Chava, what's wrong with you? Why can't you hit the ball? I'm thinking about my dad, man. Sometimes it was such torture that I would call my dad at work. Hey, what time are you coming home? And he's like, why? What happened? It's nothing yet. It's all about how we treat people. You know, it's taking away people's peace. It's taking away people's sense of peace, of quietness, letting people be who they are, letting people be who God created them to be. When we take that away from them, that's causing violence to them. We get it all the time. You know, I started out with the women, that I didn't forget about the men. Guys, we give the look too. You ever been in that place where your wife says, honey, drop me off at the mall, but just wait in the car. I just got to run in and get a few things. And an hour later, you got to get out and open the trunk. You know that look. It happens to us too. We give people the look. We give people the look of, I can't believe that you just did that. Instead of the look that we always receive from our loving God, which is always the look of love, which is always the look of, wow, you're incredible. Wow, you're wonderful. Wow, you're beautiful. Wow, you're such a treasure. Wow, look at the value in you. Every single time we don't do that, we cause violence and we cause abuse of one another. Hatred, as we know it, is not something that we learned on its own. We don't learn to hate. Hatred is actually love gone bad. Hatred actually, we can't hate someone that at one point we didn't love. But it's the fact that we didn't use it. Hatred, if it stays still, love, if it stays still, it goes bad. If it's not flowing, it goes bad. Love needs to flow. We need to be channels of God's love. It needs to flow in order to be good, in order to stay. If it's stagnant, it doesn't work. Love needs to keep going. Love is like milk. If you keep it to yourself too long, it becomes sour. Then it turns into hate. It turns into violence. It turns into abuse. It goes bad. Love needs to be shared and consumed with others. People who have suffered violence and abuse, many times I've heard in spiritual direction, I've heard people, and sometimes I find myself there too, saying, I just can't get myself to forgive. I just can't get to the point where I can say I have forgiven that person. Ever been there? You know what I'm saying? It's so hard to forgive. It's hard to forgive and to forget. And we sometimes want to forgive and to forget. But the fact is that we shouldn't forget. Because it's like that love. We have to continually do it in order to get better at it. The more I don't forget, the more I learn to forgive. The more I don't forget, the more I learn to love even more. To forgive and to love, they go together. And all of these feelings come from the inside of us. In Jesus, we learn that God is total nonviolent. That God is never an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. With God, God is total mercy and non-violent. If you want to put it in today's language, in today's word, in what we do today, God would be the most boring ending to a movie. God would be the most boring ending to a movie because the bad person, the villain, is never going to die. And have you ever seen a movie or watched them soap operas? Them soaps are great at this. They put a villain in there, whether a man or a woman, and they make that person be the baddest person in the world. It's like the most evil thing that can happen. It's like you want that person to suffer and die right then and there, and it ain't even over yet. Huh? And when do we clap? When do we get up and clap? When is it that we get happy? When the villain gets what he or she deserves, right? Then say, yes. With God, God would be the most boring ending to a movie. You would be disappointed. You paid $8.25. Because the villain will not lose. God shows his mercy to both the victim and the perpetrator. God offers his healing to both the victim and the perpetrator. Because God knows that the feelings that will make someone abuse or cause violence, it's not external. It comes from inside. And God knows that we're totally different. We are different than God. I wish we'd all behave like God, but we don't. We get angry, but God doesn't. We want to get even, but God doesn't. We want others to go through what I went through, but God doesn't. We want vengeance. Sometimes we call it justice, but God doesn't. We want the villain in the movie to die and to get his, but God doesn't. So where does all this come from? Where does all of this violence, where does all this abuse, where does all this disrespect for God's creation come from, it's not from the outside, it's from within. But Gospel of Mark, chapter 7 says, because it is from within the human heart, from the inside, that evil thoughts come, as well as immorality, stealing, lying. It's from the inside that we don't find happiness. But the secret of all of it is that God heals from the inside as well. The healing comes from the inside as well. It's from the inside of us where healing really begins. When we begin to love our enemies, when we begin to be able to pray for those who persecute us. And when we really begin to do that, healing from the inside of us will start flowing. It'll start flowing incredibly. You'll start to feel like a totally new person. You'll begin to see things in a totally different way, because until we learn to forgive from the inside what we have suffered, our eyes are shadowed by that which happened in our past. To love your enemies, to pray for those who persecute you, to go 2 hours of service instead of 1, to give him your coat and then your cloak as well. You know, to give the person your coach bag and your shoes. It's difficult. But when we begin to do that, healing from the inside will begin to flow. We will begin to do that. And as Catholics, I think we do such a great job, and I'm done. I'm almost done. For Catholics, we do such a great job of praying for others and for ourselves. This whole novena is all about prayer, isn't it? I mean, we had the prayer petitions in the lobby that we're actually going to bring up here and offer to God. And I'm sure they're wonderful, beautiful petitions. We have these beautiful crosses back here filled with petitions, and I took the time to read most of them. And you know what? I did not find one that said, pray for this piece of for hurting me, for doing this, for doing that. I didn't see anyone praying for someone who hates us. I don't remember in my 8 years of priesthood ever celebrating a mass intention for someone that I need to forgive. And yet, isn't that what Jesus calls us to do today? Pray for those who persecute you, love your enemies. Today, in a few seconds, all of us will be able to put that commandment of Jesus into practice. All of us will have that opportunity to actually listen to the Word of God and to listen to it and to put it into practice. We are going to have the time to pray for those who have caused us harm. We're going to have the opportunity to pray for those who have caused us violence. We will have the opportunity to pray for healing for those of us who have been the victims of such things. But most importantly, we will have the opportunity to put God's commandment into practice. Pray for those who persecute you. Love your enemies.